This podcast is brought to you by the North East BIC, thanks to funding from the Durham Social Boost Project provided via DCMS, helping social enterprises grow, supporting local businesses and driving innovation across our community. Thanks. Hi and welcome back to the Good Eggs podcast. My name's Anthony McDermott and we are here today at Diego's Joint in Sunnyside, Sunderland. And today we're going to be joined by the wonderful Heidi Smith from Learning Abilities CIC. So let's go and meet her. Heidi, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Good Eggs podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for agreeing to come along and talk to us about all things Learning Abilities CIC, about you, and basically just about doing good. Brill. So, the Good Eggs podcast, what we try and do here is we try and crack the shell. That's good, isn't it, eh? We try and crack the shell on finding out basically a little bit about your background, where you've come from, where you're going to, and all of the people that you're helping across your community. So, Heidi, where are you from, first of all?
So I am originally from Sunderland,
Okay.
and then I moved around quite a lot, and then I've lived in Durham for the past 13, 14 years.
Okay, great. Well, when you say moved around, UK-wide or?
Yeah, just UK-wide.
Great. Was that for work or?
So it was my ex-husband was a restaurant manager, so we just kind of moved wherever his job went, and you know, he
Got
was
well
like,
fed, I'm guessing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Happy days. And now you're back in County Durham, yeah?
Yes.
Brill. What's it like being back in the North East?
Love
I know
it.
you've been back a long time now, but...
Yeah, absolutely love it. I think the further down the country you get, the more abrupt people are, and I don't cope very well with that. So I love being in the North East.
It's strange. I was in London the other week, and I don't know about you, but you kind of forget, don't you? Like, and every now and again I pop down for work or whatever, and you just forget what it's like and how people don't speak to each other, or they won't hold a door open.
So busy.
It's just, everyone's so busy in their own world, and I get it. But you just think, take a moment for yourself.
Breathe.
Yeah,
it's fine. Smile.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. Good. So working life, what's that look like for you then? So you went to school in Sunderland, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then when you left school, what did you get involved in?
I think I wasn't really sure. You know, I think you go through phases, don't you? At one point, I really wanted to be in the police. At one point, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was determined I was going to have elocution lessons and speak fantastically. I would say, you know, the time that I got some clarity within my life was when I had my son, and I know that's true for a lot of people. I have two children that are both amazing, but my son has been my biggest teacher in life.
How old is he?
He's 14 now.
Okay, great.
So Isaac is non-verbal, he's autistic, and he has severe learning disabilities. Okay. And he has totally made me rethink so many different things, but I suppose what intelligence was the biggest thing he made me rethink. You know, because you grow up and you're told that if you stick in at academics, that's, you know, the way forward, and, you know, intelligence is based on how well you do in a test. And Isaac hasn't really got a very good understanding of language. Okay. He's more of a visual person, but he's an amazing problem solver. He can cook. You know, he's funny. You know, he's just absolutely incredible. And I would say that was a turning point for me in my life, where I thought, this is something I'm really passionate about. And yeah, I just went from there, and it's changed all the time, but he's taught me more than I could ever teach him.
Oh, bless, I love that. We'll talk a little bit about learning abilities as we kind of go through, but neurodivergency is a bit of a hot topic at the moment almost, isn't it? It seems like a bit of a, not a buzzword, but you know what I mean? It's kind of something that's all of a sudden people are talking about it quite openly, which I'm guessing is great. How do you feel that's changed over the last kind of 5-10 years? Have you noticed a change or...?
Massively, and I think there's still a long way to go, but I think that, you know, quite often people who were neurodiverse, you either had, you know, you had boys who, you know, were quite flighty and would be seen as the naughty kids, or you had girls who were very quiet and didn't bother anybody, and were seen as, or were able to mask and blend in. So there was a lot of people that kind of went under the radar. I mean, I don't know for definite because I'm still on the pathway, right. But I am actually in the process of getting tested myself, which is quite interesting. And I think, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, you've managed and you've got this far. And I think, but you didn't have any other choice. Yeah. So it's not necessarily that, you know, you managed and therefore you don't need that support. You didn't have another choice. And I love that there's more conversation going on about it. Yeah. I think the difficulty is then asking ourselves how we let so many people down and what we're going to do about it going forward, because at the moment, you know, there's waiting lists, astronomical waiting lists. You know, the government want to take away the right to choose, which is then going to increase those waiting lists. And, you know, it then leads to mental health problems, and it's just got such a knock-on effect. So I think it's great that more people are talking about it, and I hope that with that comes more action.
Love that. And in terms of your diagnosis, and what made you decide to go and get a diagnosis? Like, what kind of spurred you on?
So it's funny, I didn't speak until I was 5. Right, I was never really a kid that played with toys. I'm more like ripped up bits of paper, or, you know, I was not really, I mean, I couldn't tell you other than 2 teddy bears, anything I was attached to as a kid. And I was always kind of very quirky, struggled socially at school, got picked on a lot. And masked quite a lot. You know, I tended to blend into the environment I was in because I thought that was safer. And I had an incident a couple of years ago in which I got myself into a lot of trouble. It was... I started working within supported employment, and I absolutely loved it because it was the idea that... people who have disabilities weren't going to end up in hospitals or day centres or anything. So I really loved that. And the company I worked for, I was 100% behind them. Like, loved everything they were doing. I still do. Love some of the things that they were doing. But unfortunately, I found out some of the things that they were doing weren't right. And I was just... It affected my mental health in a way that I can't describe. Like, I couldn't sleep for months. Even though I'd done what I needed to do and kind of ended up in that whistleblowing situation, I couldn't just let it go. It really kind of consumed me a lot, to the point where I was doing things that aren't my personality. So, you know, at one point I went into the building to confront them. And I mean, I'm not an aggressive person, so I did just go and sit down and say, you know, but the police very easily could have came and arrested me because...
Trespass, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I ended up getting, you know, kind of pre-court action letters and all this type of stuff. And it was my sisters who said to me, you know, we've told you this for a while, but I think now it's really starting to impact you. You know, your fixation on it, you know, is not healthy. And obviously, you know, we understand why you're so upset about it. But, you know, maybe now is the time that you need to go and speak to somebody. And, you know, I went and spoke to a doctor, and I was explaining things, and they said, you know, it does sound like you and neurodiverse, and that's why, you know, you were fixation. So, yes. Yeah. And obviously given kind of my history and certain kind of quirks that I have, like sensory issues and things like that, and they just said, we're going to refer you. So I'm on the pathway, and it'll be a very, very long time before I know for definite, but I just think better late than never. Yeah. And
just for the listeners and the viewers, kind of what does that diagnosis process look like then? Or what have you been through so far anyway?
So I got a referral sent to a specific team. I can't recall what the team's called, but they just called me to do a screening. Right. And then within the screening, they just asked me certain questions, and then they agreed that, yes, it does sound like I need to be on that pathway. And then you go and meet somebody, and you have an initial assessment, and they will decide what pathway to put you on. So whether it's ADHD, whether it's autism, whether it's mental health, whatever it is. And then you go on a waiting list until people can see you. Totally different process to what I had with my son 10 years ago. So that's really interesting.
Right. For the better or for the worse? Or
probably for worse for other, I felt really supported when we had my son's diagnosis, and that isn't a true picture of what happens today. So we had a lot of people that came to the house. You know, we had a lot of input. You know, from those papers going in to a diagnosis, there was a 6-month wait, and there'll be people at home that go, stop bragging. You know, that's. But I'm perfectly aware that that's not the picture today, and it makes me really sad when parents come forward and they say, you know, we're struggling to get a diagnosis, or we've been through the diagnosis process and they missed out by 1 point. Or when you meet an adult and they say, well, they were going to look into it when I was a kid, but I made eye contact with the doctor, so they decided not to. And it's so frustrating. And I think it's you know, unfortunately it does come down to funding, and then what support is available after
resources,
that.
isn't it? It's always resources, isn't it? And it's so sad, and we all know some of the challenges that the NHS and all these other organisations have, but it's so sad that the lack of resource is a cost to all of us, isn't it? Yeah. It's scary because, you know, some of these people who've missed out by a point, that can, not being diagnosed or failure to diagnose, that can have a real compounded effect, can't it, as they go through life?
And if anything, more expensive in the long run.
Yeah, of course.
Because, you know, they're then going to have to go back through that process. So then, you know, it's paying for that process again. Yeah. But then it's also having to put in that mental health support that's now, you know, an effect of not having that support initially. So it's more expensive long term.
What would you think they could do differently? What would you suggest to them? If you had the opportunity to sit with the minister for it, or whatever, whoever it may be, what would the suggestion you would make to them?
I think it would be to implement, because not everybody, you know, wants a diagnosis. They might know that they, you know, have things that they struggle with. But I would say to make things more widespread. So I know there's some places, and I absolutely love this, within parks they have like Makaton boards.
Okay.
You know, things like learning sign language within schools. That, I mean, people have been shouting about that for ages. But just making places more accessible, because when it's accessible to everybody. You're not taken away from anybody by adding that accessibility in there. So I just think, you know, we're in a first world country. We have resources, really unlimited resources. It's just a case of where those are going. And I think by focusing on people and seeing them as individuals, but if you're making an adjustment for one person, it won't just support one person, it will support a lot of people.
So, going on to learning abilities, so, you know, in terms of a egg-based pun, what came first, the passion or the business? I'm guessing, I guess it was the passion for you, was it? And then, at what point did you think, right, I need to do something about this, and how was the company formed? How did that come to fruition?
So, I've always been involved in community groups. I'm very proud of a charity that still runs today that I founded years and years ago with a group of friends.
All right, who is it?
It's called The Sensory Place.
All right, fantastic. So, I feel like I know The Sensory Place.
You will, they're fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like I do, yeah.
I'm not involved at all anymore, so I take no credit whatsoever. But I was there in the beginning, and, you know, and, you know, I've always been involved in things like that, and I really love it. And it was about looking at the problem and thinking, well, if it's not just me that's facing this problem, there'll be other people. Yeah. So when I kind of stepped away from the sensory place, I was thinking, well, what do I want to do now? And a big issue for me has always been the mortality rates between those with learning disabilities and those without.
All right, okay, is there a correlation, is it?
It's around 30-year gap.
Wow, okay,
so people with learning disabilities do die a lot younger. Okay. And it's the people around me that have inspired me to think about that and what it means. I
guess Isaac's had a big impact on that, obviously.
Massive. So to be able to take him to the doctors, I took him to the doctors with an ear infection when he was 2, and I didn't know he was autistic then, and he was terrified. He was trying to get out the door, he was screaming, and the doctor said to me, well, why is he going on like that? And I said, well, he's scared. And she said, well, I can't do anything for him when he's going on like that. And I said, but how am I supposed to help him? And she said, well, if it's too dry, it's an ear infection. If it's too wet, it's an ear infection. And she just sent us on our way, and I was furious. And, you know, those bad experiences then have such a negative impact in that, you know, next time I possibly wouldn't have wanted to take him to the doctors, because what would be the point? Or I'd take him to the doctors and would have a similar experience. So there's things that can be done around that. which is a project we're starting this year, so I don't want to say too much about it because I'm like... but that was why it was started. It was to kind of address those. And then...
So did you have any sort of business background yourself at this point? Or?
None.
Okay.
Know nothing about business. I still don't. I know nothing.
So you had this idea. So you had this idea that you wanted to help others.
Yeah.
How did it come about that you wanted to be a kick then? So did you reach out and find somebody, or was it just you did a bit of research, or was it? I guess you were inspired by the charity, weren't you? I'm guessing that was part of it.
Yes, absolutely part of it. And I suppose, you know, people. So I reached out to the BIC when I first set up Learning Abilities, met with Kevin Marcus, who was fantastic, told him what I was wanting to do, and then I kind of, as life happens, I wandered off on another path and I started doing other things. And I thought to myself, you know, kind of when I left the other company, I really loved my job and I was thinking, well, what am I going to do now? I don't know what to do with myself because I was so passionate about what I was doing. That I just thought I'm going to give this a go. And, you know, I didn't expect it to be what it's become. I kind of just thought it was something I could dip my toe into and see how it worked. But the longer I was in it, the more issues I identified because I knew I wanted us to be like a holistic service and I wanted us to offer that social side and that caring side and be more than just an employment service. And it's just kind of grown from there, and, you know, it's chaotic, and I wouldn't for a moment, you know, pretend to anybody that I really know what I'm doing. I just go along with it and do what I think is the best thing at the time.
Good. So the business is set up to support others, obviously. How does the business, how do you bring money in? How does that work?
So we offer job coaching, so we don't bring money in through the job coaching. We help people find work, and that is the element that we don't get payment for. But
so is that things like CV writing? Would you help with that? Is it every element? Yeah, interview process? Great.
Everything, but we would follow a supported employment pathway. So instead of just putting in a job application, quite often you would call the employer in advance and just explain to them, you know, I've got this candidate, you know, would you be willing to have a look at that?
That's really good,
yeah. Yeah, most employers are fantastic and they go, absolutely, bring them through.
Do you know, it's really interesting you say that. I had an incident years ago myself, and I was doing some mentoring for a local education establishment, shall we say, and the student that they gave me had Asperger's, and they didn't tell me, and it's a difficult one. I understand it, because do you have to tell somebody, do you not? And I was really frustrated because they didn't tell me. And I remember sitting with this guy, and first of all, I asked him to meet me in a bar, just because that's where I used to meet people, for a bar, and would have a coffee, and that to him straight away was a challenge, coming into a bar full of people. And I didn't know that because I didn't know anything about it. And I remember we had a conversation, and I always remember he said, Anthony, you may think I am a little bit odd. And I am odd because I have, and then he told me that he had Asperger's and all that, and I was like, right, that kind of makes sense why you're the way you are now. But the reason I mention it is I always remember thinking, I wish somebody had just picked up the phone and said, look, you know, this is the, I mean, I still would have took them on, but this is the student, this is some of his challenges, this is, you know, how you might be able to get around it. He did, and I remember being so frustrated about that. So I totally get it.
I think it's difficult as well because, you know, we have it where we've got clients that don't want to disclose that they're neurodiverse, or that they have any other type of disability, because they're concerned that it will impact their chances of getting a job. And unfortunately sometimes it does.
Of course, not right, but it still happens, of course.
But then what happens is some companies will say, well, you falsified your paperwork because you haven't declared that, which is really frustrating. But the kind of negative to them not declaring it is that they're then not protected under disability law because they haven't, you know, kind of disclosed. They should be because they have a disability, but at the same time, the employer can't, you know, put those reasonable adjustments in if they're not aware. So it can be really difficult, and we get really kind of frustrated for the clients sometimes.
Totally get that. No, I totally get that. I think just having open dialogue is so important, isn't it? And that's one of the things that I really see is missing. So kind of going back to what I was saying earlier with the whole kind of, not promotion, that's not the word, but with the kind of exposure that neurodivergency is getting, that must be really refreshing. I'm guessing that it's an open conversation now.
It is, and I love, you know, the inclusivity and the open conversation. I think the difficulty you still have is there's no other kind of, I don't know what the right word is, it's totally gone from my brain, but there's no protected characteristic. There's no other protected characteristic in which you could get away with kind of discriminating against. But disability is a really difficult one. And I think, unfortunately, that means that a lot of people who are trying to achieve good end up tiptoeing around these big companies instead of holding them to account. So I don't know if you'll have seen this, you might not have done, but in August of this past year, I took a client to an interview at a Toby Carvery.
Right.
And they wouldn't interview her because she had a disability. They wouldn't interview her at all. So I tried to email the CEO and I'd said, I don't agree with this and blah, blah, blah. And nobody responded to me. Obviously, I know people think, oh, well, you know, they'll talk to you. They won't. If you're a tiny fish, they're not going to talk to you. So I wrote an open letter on my Facebook, and I do regret this. I should probably say that first. I wrote an open letter on my Facebook, and I said, you know, it's disability discrimination. Don't appreciate it. This person was more than capable of doing the role, and it went viral. So it was shared a lot.
National?
Yes. And it even went to America. Apparently it was shared a lot of times in America. Good. But I kind of stayed away from it because I didn't want to hear all the negative comments. Yeah. I wanted to be really positive, which didn't work out too well for me when a client of mine who struggles really bad with anxiety, he'd gone through and he'd read all the negative comments and they bothered him, so he screenshot them and sent me them all. So I didn't want to see them, but I actually ended up with all of them. But people had very mixed views. So there was the majority of people were really upset at the company. You know, they wanted them to change and have some accountability and all of that type of stuff. But then there was other people who were quite angry with me, and you know, they were saying, you know, that I need to address it better, and I'm setting people back because a lot of employers are terrified of hiring somebody with a disability because they're worried that they're going to get it wrong. And I've just highlighted what happens if you get it wrong, because that particular Toby Carvery ended up in a social media blackout and lost quite a bit of business, which wasn't my intention. I'm not, you know, a hate campaigner or anything like that. And I only had about 500 people on my Facebook. I didn't really think much of it. But I've now got 1,500 people on. Yeah, so there was a lot. It was a learned opportunity for me. It was something that I kind of acknowledged. Okay, I could have gone about this differently. But it happens,
or doesn't it? Reaction, you know, emotion, and because you're so emotively involved with it, and because you've got that passion, it comes from the heart. Yeah. And we've all been there where we've typed an email out, and often what you need to do is go, right, I've typed it out, I'm going to walk away and come back. But 9 times out of 10, do we do that? And also potentially be neurodivergent, would you do that? No, you go send.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was the client as well, because she took it. She applies for job after job. You know, she doesn't want to wait for me to apply with her. She's so determined to work that it'll be 11 o'clock at night, and her email's pinging, because we have like a joint email for a job search, and her email's pinging, and I message her, I'm like, go to bed, like, it's fine. And to see her, and she took it so gracefully, you know, to be told that if the person knew she had a disability, she never would have invited her for an interview. It's not a suitable place. Didn't ask what the disability was, because disability isn't one size.
It's really, and obviously it did happen, but I can't believe it happened this day and age. Yeah. You know, to be fair, you know, if it happened to my grandma's generation, for example, I get it, because people were a little bit, you know, not as well informed, and I'm not saying it's right, but things were different, you know, and people weren't as well educated. Now, there's just no excuses there.
No, not at all.
So, yeah, it just shouldn't have happened.
No. But unfortunately it did, and I did have a meeting with the human resources person, and straight away there just wasn't any acknowledgement. It was like, this isn't our understanding of supported employment. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but I do it on a client-by-client basis. So if I had somebody else, I'd have rang ahead and said, you know, they want to come for an interview, is it possible for you to make these adjustments? I knew my client well enough to know that she was fine. She didn't need those adjustments, and she probably wouldn't have needed support within the role anyway. But there was never acknowledgement, there was never an apology.
Where is it now? Is it just kind of...
Yeah, it's just been left. And it's frustrating because you think, you know, the lady was saying to me, you know, we employ 46,000 people. And I thought, but then you've got more of a responsibility. That's, you know, you should be thinking, what can we do?
Because you must have a percentage of that workforce that
Yes.
is got challenges. It must be the case, mustn't it?
Well, you certainly wouldn't turn down, you know, people who are disabled. You wouldn't say, well, you're not coming in and spending your money. So, you know, surely representation is a positive thing.
Yeah, of course it is.
But, yeah.
It's sad. It is sad. And no, thanks for sharing that as well. It's really interesting to hear that. So I hadn't heard that, actually.
Well, I'm not recommending that that's the way to do things. Just to be clear, like, you know, that was a learning opportunity for me.
But I'm definitely going to go and Google it now, you know that, don't you?
You will find it, believe you me.
No, good. So, go back to Learning Abilities. So,
Yes.
Learning Abilities was, as you said, you've got no kind of business experience. Is it something you went in on alone, or did you have somebody else with you, or
No.
initially?
So I had some savings that I put in myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's see how this goes.
What was the initial plan? Did you think, right, I want to help 10 people, or was it you want to have a building? What was the initial kind of dream or vision, or was it not really like that?
So I think for me, I love organisations that manage to scale up.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's absolutely fantastic. But my only goal has ever been to get up every day and do something that I care about. Like I'm not a money orientated person. I'd rather do something, and I'd rather experience something than I would go and buy something, because I lose everything I buy anyway. Like I don't wear fancy jewellery because I lose it. You know, I don't buy nice clothes because I rip them. Like I'm just not that type of person. So it was just... I put some savings into an account, and we got an office, and I just thought, even if I can help one or two people and I can support them within their job, and then I can step away, and that person has gained independence within their job. And it was just... It kind of took a bit of a snowball effect because there wasn't services like that. I mean, there are, but they're so few and far between.
What's the North East like for that kind of service, generally speaking?
So I would say, again, it's a very limited.
Is it, right?
So County Durham's quite lucky because they've got Durham Enable, which is you know, a county funded service. They've got a couple of other kind of in-work support services. So they've got things that are similar. But what because of my experience, and I'm quite a stubborn person that'll cut my nose off to spite my face. I was like, I refused, because all of these other services were connected with where I used to work. I refused to go and kind of go cap in hand to any of them and say, can I come and partner with you? Can I work with you? And that did me a lot of damage, I would say. And again, a learning experience.
What would you say to other people who were in that position? I
would say find somebody to talk to, whether it's a friend or a therapist. I maybe should have gone down the therapist route. But I would say that don't assume that everybody is the same, and all you need is to meet a few people. You know, organisations are bigger than just one person. They have to be. I think
that's a really good thing to say. I mean, you know, referring back to the pod, but you know, there are bad eggs out there. Yeah. But for every bad egg, there's a million good eggs.
Absolutely.
Really is. And sometimes just that bad experience, like Toby Carvery, for example, you've had a bad experience, but the chances are they probably do some cool stuff down the line. They probably do some nice stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but it's difficult, isn't it? I get that, to be blinded by that. So I guess your advice would be speak to somebody else, run it by them.
and maybe don't storm into buildings or anything like that. And just kind of. And it's a shame because I probably held myself back a lot, but at the same time, I am somebody that I want to be able to say that I did it. I don't want somebody else to be able to pop up and say, and I mean, I didn't do it by myself. It's nothing like that. But I mean, I've got an absolutely amazing team, and they did, you know, all of the hard stuff as well. But I'm somebody that I would rather say I did it myself than go and ask somebody. Have you ever seen that meme where a person's pulling a sofa with a chair and it says how stubborn I am? That is how stubborn I am. So I do, you know, a lot of these different services, they had bits of employment support for adults with disabilities. So they had the job coaching, and then they had the job coaching within work, and then they had the in-work support, which is the long term. And I just thought I'm going to be a continual service because I know... because of Isaac, that you do get passed from pillar to post quite a lot. So I wanted to have something that completely connected through. It then meant, you know, they knew who they were working with. And it was just, it worked because obviously we're small. I know that's not possible for everybody. And sometimes we do, you know, have a couple of different people that support. But yeah, so we just decided to do it like that.
I guess sometimes just plugging that gap with people who have the passion to drive it is all it takes. That doesn't sound a lot, does it? But actually sometimes that's just the thing that's a little bit different. It's having that passion to fill in a gap that there's always gaps all over the place. But if you can just slot in there quite nicely and do it well, there's no reason why you have to stay a one-person operation forever. You know, and you've got a team of how many is there now of you guys?
There's 13 altogether, but a lot of us are like, you know, work part-time or the dip in to do bits and pieces.
That's amazing. How many years have you been trading?
2, so not a lot.
To grow that, you know, exponentially in 2 years is amazing, Heidi. So fair play. And you've got a cafe now, haven't you, as well? Like a small, it's coffee shop cafe, whatever.
So one thing that we did notice when we were doing job coaching is a lot of employers are quite nervous having a job coach in with somebody because they seem to think that we're there to spy on them. I've had to sign NDAs, which I found really interesting, and it was so thick, and I got quite excited because I've never signed one. I said to them, what am I going to see? And they were like, well, nothing. And I looked and I thought, that's a big document for nothing. But, you know, we're not there to spy on somebody else, you know. If anything, we want to help the company because the company's doing such a good thing. And we've worked with some amazing companies. We did have a client in Morrison's. We had... the In Collection was probably the best experience I had. We had this manager at the In Collection called Tracy, and she's just the most, if she isn't neurodiverse herself, I'll eat my hat. But she's just the most inclusive person I've ever met, and she inspired the team to be that way. And they ended up doing us a fundraiser because they loved what we did. And, you know, they've given a couple of people opportunities. So I think there's a lot of, you know, huge positives that have come out of it. But you know, there's still kind of a lot of work to go. I think I've trailed off talking about.
No, it's good. It's really good. So going back to your business a little bit. So what would be the best piece of advice that you could, somebody who also has a passion or, you know, may have a personal experience or a challenge and they want to set up a business and do something good and give something back, what would be the best piece of advice that you could give them?
I would say speak to as many people as you can, and stay true to what it is that you're doing, because you can't know everything, and we can't stop learning. You know, you've got to. I'll jump on any course if somebody says to me, "Oh, there's a course going," and I'm like, "Yeah, no bother, I'll jump on it." You've got to be teachable, and you've got to realise that the other people who are doing these things are no better than you are. They just have found their kind of bravery to take a step forward and jump in and see what's going to happen.
Good, I love that.
I suppose it's like it's better to start your journey, and even if it goes wrong, you know, than to never start your journey and think, well, I could have done this, I could have done that.
Yeah, try it. You know, and it's been a theme that we find through the pod. Actually, lots of people have said, you know, I'm not a business person, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And actually you all are, but they always say that. But then they said, you know what, just give it a go, just try it. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah. You know, it's nothing's going to set on fire, nothing's going to burn down. Yeah. So give it a go. No, great. And I think you mentioned there as well, just surround yourself with people. Yeah. You know, I always say this, you know, I'm not an expert at anything, but I know lots of people who are. And I think the more people you know, the more opportunities you get, the more doors open, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you meet some really inspiring people who make you think about things in a completely different way. And I would say listen to podcasts, because that is a huge, you know, audio books. I love the Simon Sinek books, and, you know, just give it a go. Yeah,
and that's what the idea of this pod, you know, we want people to listen to real stories like yours and think, actually, do you know what, I can have a go at this, I can do it. No, great. So one of the things we always say on the podcast as well is if you could, you know, talk to the camera or talk to our listeners and just say, and just either ask for something that you really would like some help with, or offer something that you would really like to help with, what would it be?
I would say employment opportunities for our adults, because we have so many adults that they're determined to work, they're desperate to, and they, you know, a lot of people assume that because somebody has a disability that they're either not going to be able to support them, and it is fear. It's not because people are cruel or they, you know, they're not wanting to do something. It's fear that they're not going to be able to support them, that they're not going to get it right, or that, you know, maybe they have a limited budget and they're worried that that person won't be as productive as somebody else. But I can tell you from experience that our adults are more reliable. They don't want to take holidays. You know, you'll say to them, you've got to use, you know, you so many weeks before the end of the financial year. They go, I don't really need a holiday. And I'm like, yes, but I do. So get it in there, because I'm not coming in. You know, they're just so... they're determined, and they've spent their entire lives with the focus being on what they can't do, because unfortunately that's the only way to access support, is for that focus on what you can't do. So, you know, they relish somebody showing them what they can do, and they really can do it, and they're just amazing. Like, they're so obviously, not to sound patronising to them whatsoever, but they inspire us every single day, just watching them and how hard working they are, how lovely they communicate with each other. I left the cafe to come here, and just watching how they all interact with each other, work together, cook. You know, they're learning skills, they're learning those employability skills. It's just amazing.
Love that. The cafe, whereabouts is it, if I wanted to pop in for a coffee?
So at the moment, it's in Horden Centennial Centre until the end of March. We are looking to move, and we're hoping to get our own premises within Horden. But I think it'll take a little bit of time. But it's just been, it was just a 3-month project that we were able to do because of the Boost Fund. And we were hoping we could teach them life skills, so cooking skills, we could teach them money, we could teach them employability skills, confidence skills, all of that. And it worked that well that we were able to extend it for another 3 months. So it's just been brilliant.
It's exciting. And as you said earlier, things just snowball and snowball. It's,
yes, they do.
So what's next then? What's next for Learning Ability CIC?
I'm hoping we have just been really, really lucky in securing some funding from the People's Postcode Trust. We went on a social enterprise acumen course, which allowed us to be able to apply, and that's opening again in September. So get on a course so that you can apply, because they're brilliant courses. So we're going to have just more of a structure. You know, we've got a couple extra job coaches starting. We do always hire neurodiverse people, so I think it's 80% of our staff team are neurodiverse, right. Wow. Which I love. And I think it's, I want to say it's either 25% or 50%, I'll have to double check, are also parents of children with disabilities, so it's really important. So we would like to just do more of the same. We would like to have a permanent premises, but we would also like to address our original mission, which was addressing those mortality rates. And we do have, you know, projects in mind, having more social groups, because we love that. We went bowling last week, which was brilliant. I lost badly, and I had the sides up. It was very sad. So just kind of keep going with what we're doing, and we're very much a user-led service. So, you know, the adults kind of tell us what it is that they want and what they need, and so just keep going. And
I love it. Do you know what I love as well? I love how animated you are. You're just so passionate about it. Like, it's great, honestly. Yeah. It's been great. Heidi, thanks so much for coming in. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Hopefully it's inspired somebody just to reach out. We'll leave all of your links in the comments below. If somebody just wants to reach out and contact you guys, I guess you've got a website, things like that, and, you know, if there's any employees out there who want to find out more, just to come and speak to you, really, that's open communication. But great. Well, Heidi, you are definitely a good egg. So I'm going to give you one of our lovely branded eggs here, which is an egg with a smiley face on.
Lovely.
So thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Cheers, Heidi. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.